I wanted to do a video just to keep this channel going. I think I have another one or two subscribers. And I've been thinking, I keep thinking about God and uh, wrestling with Him. And this morning I was doing the prayers that I do, and I came upon part of what was given for the day in this Magnificat prayer book that comes out monthly had to do with this Jesuit Walter, I suppose you pronounce it, Zizek, who spent 23 years in Soviet prisons. He was born in America, Pennsylvania, I think, and answered a call by Pius XII to be a missionary in Russia. He was arrested, etc., tortured. You can read about him in Wikipedia. It's quite a very interesting life. He lived 80 years, was in hard labor, etc. And what I found interesting was his talking about trusting in God, so that he speaks about the Old Testament and how basically everything was taken away from the Jews, who recalled, the golden age of Solomon, etc. But this was just a memory by the rivers of Babylon. And it must have seemed that it was the end of the world, the end of the covenant, the end of God's special care for his chosen people. So I'm wondering, this guy died, way after the Holocaust. So I wonder what he would have to say about that. But in any case, uh, he says that in truth, Israel's troubles were a manifestation of God's special providence, his special love for his chosen people. Uh, he was trying to wean them away like a fond and loving father from trust in princes or kings or in armies or in the powers of this world. He was trying to teach them again and again that their faith must be only in him alone. He was leading them through every trial and in every age to the realization that God alone is faithful in all tribulations, that he alone is constant in his love and must be clung to even when it seems all else has been turned upside down. Their part in the covenant must be to trust in him alone, to remain always faithful, to look to him and not to other gods, to rely on him and not on rulers or chariots or bowmen uh, or bowmen. He was ever faithful, and so in turn must they be, even when he led them where they would not go, into a land they knew not, or into exile. For he had chosen them, they were his people. He would no more forget them than a mother could forget the child of her womb. And so I found this to be kind of a fresh way, I suppose, to speak of the dark night of the soul of John of the Cross, where we are stripped of everything and can only have faith and trust. That would be real faith and trust in the biblical sense, which is a very interesting topic because I started thinking too of how, and I've said it before in these videos, we are wired to believe. We are wired to arrive at some relative, tending towards a simplified view of things, then put our trust. Women put their trust in men or men in women. And of course, we now put our trust in people have put trust in political leaders that are clear scoundrels, but they will deal with this cognitive dissonance, as I learned from my professor Blenkingsop, who died just a few days ago at age almost 95. When facts do not agree with what you want to believe, you this dissonance, this lack of harmony, this lack of coherence between what you think you know and new information that's coming in, you you put that aside. You look the other way, you deny it, you interpret it. And so you hold on to your belief. Now, in the biblical story, and Blenkingsop, Joseph Blenkingsop, talked about this in the course that I took with him on Third Isaiah. Certain beliefs, for example, the inviolability of Jerusalem, the city of God. The first Isaiah said that's inviolable, it stands firm, etc. Well, that was conquered and destroyed. So that one of the things that Blenkinsop said, very memorable, was that Israel in exile was seeking a salvageable past. How do you understand what has occurred in a way that can be salvaged, refurbished, rejuvenated? You continue to believe in God. Now you believe God has punished you. God has meant to purify you. Jesus spoke of pruning or cleansing a tree or a vine so that you rearrange your faith to uh, hold on to the kernel of your belief, which is that God is all powerful and all good, and anything that happens is for your own good, correction, purification, etc. Paideia, as the letter to the Hebrews says, which I've spoken about several times, like a father. And I remember reading, I guess his name is Mark, the last name is Marcus, I forget the first name, um, maybe the history of the Jews by documents. And when the Jews were expelled from Spain in 1492, the Chronicle, I forget who it's by, could be Abravanel, one of these great Jewish figures in history. He begins by saying, in the year such and such, the Jewish, you know, numbering of years, the Lord saw fit to visit his people again. So in the Bible, you have this verb pakat, to visit, which in Hosea is normally to visit for your sins. call you to account. But in Genesis, for example, God will surely visit his people, Joseph says, and this is repeated in Exodus, etc. Visit as salvation. We say that in the Benedictus, blessed be the Lord the God of Israel, for he has, visited his people. Or in Luke 7, God has visited his people when they raised the son of the widow of Nain. So the biblical faith is an expression of this fundamental wiring that we have to believe, with the difference that for Christians and Jews, it's a special faith based on this book. For Jews, it ends with Chronicles, with a promise of a new temple, a promise of a return, like going back up to Mount Zion, maybe the coming of the Messiah. For Christians, it ends with the story of Jesus, which, by the way, historically speaking, is a story that ends in the defeat of the crucifixion. The resurrection is something accessible only to faith. It might have been, as 1 Corinthians says, that he appeared to over 500 brethren from above or something. But basically speaking, appearances of Jesus, especially official appearances of the risen Jesus, stopped. And so uh, in Christianity, we, based on experiences that the apostles had and disciples had, etc., we believe that Jesus really triumphed and became Lord and Messiah, Kyrios, the name applied to God in the Greek Old Testament. So that we are wired to trust and to have faith. And again, this hardware can receive software of every kind, including viruses. And basically today what we have is the social media and television and radio, especially AM radio, which is a constant brainwashing that leads people to believe certain things and disbelieve other things that have nothing to do with the exercise of reason. That is why in the Catholic tradition, you have a strong insistence on the essentiality of faith and reason, not just faith and not just reason, because if you have just reason, you you don't have faith. You have only knowledge, real or imagined. And what I'm talking about here is the right kind of trust or a trust that basically doesn't go away, or it might go away in the case of people who totally despair, and then there are plenty of people like that. Reading about one in particular now, Sarah Teasdale, a poet. But what I find myself doing at night, as I have said, is turning to God uh, by saying, you are, I don't understand a lot of things about the world, and I am not even feeling very loving towards you. That can sometimes vary, especially as I've said before, with memory. When I recall all the experiences that I have had in my life, especially experiences that were brought back, memories that were brought back by the death of Professor Blenkingsop. I was in Rome. I was in my, 40s, and I was at the Biblicum, probably the greatest Bible school in the world, listening to this class by this Englishman from Notre Dame University. Very, very learned man. He was 71 at the time. And things like that, and my conversations with him, and the passion that goes into studying the Bible, the passion that goes into uh, being fascinated with things. And I have found that religious things are the most, fascinating. And so your attitude towards God can vary, but nevertheless, I turn to God with some kind of trust that He exists, that He's there, and that every other avenue for me seems to be leading to a dead end, so to speak. I was thinking today about, this idea of trust. Some people say I have trust in myself. I trust in humanity. I trust in the universe. I read, among the books that I read every morning, I just finished my little reading of Seneca, the Stoic philosopher. He sort of believed in the wisdom of nature and of the life according to nature as the proper way to be happy. I've even heard the expression to be happy even in your unhappiness, which is kind of a strange thing to say. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about trusting in something outside of ourselves, that we have this intuition or maybe just a wish that this person that we call God, that we trust, who exists independently of us and independently of our desire to invent someone like God, once we believe that God exists independently of our inventiveness or creation of crutches, etc., then that's the essence of this kind of trust, which has to be, again, a trust that cohabits with reason. Otherwise, it could be trust in Trump, or trust in Hitler, or trust in the free market, or trust in America, or trust in whatever it is. I'm talking about trust in God as the other, and basically using, I guess, if you wanted to talk about computer programs, of which I know little, it's the computer language of the Bible, properly understood. I'm reading the Jewish Study Bible, the second edition, and it's fascinating, especially the essays by Mark Brettler, and how Jewish biblical studies have now aligned, or are so integrated into non-Jewish biblical studies, especially Protestant Catholics caught up rather, you know, early. Now the Jews, Catholics, Protestants, atheists study the Bible and arrive at very similar conclusions in many ways. But I was saying to God, I don't feel a lot of love for you, God. I mean, I don't BS God, I mean, let's put it that way. I don't like to. I mean, I don't like to BS, and I hate BS. And I know some BSers, you know, some maybe aspiring to be artistic BSers, but I hate untruth, I hate misinformation, and I hate not checking things so that you can make some determinations as intelligent as you can of the veracity and accuracy of what has been stated. But as I turn to God at night and I say, I don't have a lot of love for you or anything like that, I'm still turning to you. You're God, I'm not. You're the one who's supposed to do more. I remembered, and this is a little story, of what Therese of Lisieux said, wrote in a letter to her sister, if I'm not mistaken, Celine. It is trust and trust alone that must lead us to love, capital L, meaning love, meaning God. So that Therese is the great saint of trust, confiance. And the way I came upon this saying of hers is interesting. And I've said this before in some other video, or maybe more than once. A friend of mine named Ken gave me a bookmark in English that said, "It is by trust and trust alone that we must be led to God," or something like that. And many years ago, early 2000s, when I was going to Rome twice a year, and he was living there, and we saw each other, we were very good friends. He gave me this bookmark. One night I couldn't sleep, and I got it into my head. Let me look up the original of this saying of Therese. How do you go about that without a great concordance? It's impossible. And so I did something very unusual, or the results were unusual. I had three little volumes, pensées of Therese, thoughts of Therese in French, selections from all kinds of places. Three little ones, thin volumes. I went to number 2. I opened it up. I did not find on the pages that I opened, 2 pages side by side, this phrase. I turned the page and I found the phrase in French. And in those days, I was doing the Emmaus retreats. And I think the very first one was they would give you at breakfast in the Emmaus retreats a kind of a table, what do you call that, a tablecloth or something for your plate, made out of paper, but drawn by Catholic elementary school children as a gift to these retreatants, all men or all women, as the case you know, might be. And so I recycled this plate, or this piece of paper that's just to serve as under the plate for breakfast. And I printed out in big letters this, and I have it in my closet. And that's where this picture comes from. And so, what I mean by trusting in this power outside of ourselves is something that is illustrated by events that seem miraculous. That's why people do seek some sort of proof or sign that God exists, even when many things would appear to contradict it. As I've been saying, I'm probably more aware now, maybe through self knowledge or maturity or just aging or whatever, of how many reasons there are to believe that God is an invention of ours. But then, of course, that invention, if it is an invention, depends on our hard wiring. We seek to understand things and put things in order. Geniuses, an Einstein, when he wants to put the universe in order, he doesn't just say, oh, nice stars, and what I would do, nice sun, it comes up, it goes down, and blah, blah, blah. Einstein develops, the theory of relativity, that sort of thing. Great minds, will talk about a paradigm shift, or they will have a comprehensive understanding of things, and they move things along. Descartes, I think, therefore I am, and Plato, and then Aristotle, quite different. The pupil is quite different than the teacher and comes up with another synthesis of knowledge. So, we know that we are inclined to put things in order and to believe things. And so we have to be very, very respectful of all the things that we are able to know, and neglect of what is available scientifically or through thinking or reason or reading or just good information. That is a sine qua non. That's a absolutely essential condition. We have to have knowledge. We have to use our Homo sapiens faculty. I know people, and I was shocked sometimes. I know I have a friend who comes up with this reasoning things. I figured this person must have been around this age. Specifically, St. Augustine must have been around 50 when he had his conversion. Because I just heard a priest say that his mother, St. Monica, prayed for him for 30 years. So I figured he must have been around 20 when she started praying for him. I mean, you figure whatever you want, but you can Google this in 5 seconds and find out that he was actually like 30, 33 when he had his conversion. So that if you like to speculate and guess at things and order the world that way and go around saying St. Augustine was 50 when he had his conversion, I mean, you're a person that doesn't respect facts, doesn't respect the human process of fact finding. You prefer to invent things in your head. And that is precisely, probably right now, the biggest problem we have in the world is the attack on the very notion of truth. In Russia, they've got it down, pat. Nothing nothing. It's very hard for the truth about Ukraine to filter into the Russian populace when you control everything. China does basically the same thing, which makes me think too, by the way, of the enormous uh, qualitative difference that the Judeo-Christian tradition, as a Christian, I would say, and foremost the Christian tradition in Europe, makes an enormous difference, even in the midst of all the secularization, lack of religiosity, all these things. It's quite different to have like an atheistic, communistic philosophy in China or Russia, for example. Even though in Russia you have a church that blesses, like in here we have United States, we have a church that kind of likes to bless cannons. Remember that in Mexico they always spoke of Spellman blessing the Vietnam cannons. So I mean, the marriage of church and state, rubbing each other's backs, scratching each other's backs. That's as ancient as religion. But nevertheless, we have ideas about, even though World War II, but we have ideas about what is right and compassion and even the truth that I think are more alive in the West than in places like, especially where the governments are dyed in the wool, atheistic, or in practice, if not in theory. And I think in China they're atheists, but in Russia you might just have a church that provides glamour, bells and whistles to cover up with incense. Just they say that they used incense for the bad smell in the medieval churches or something. People didn't bathe. Well, this is incense to cover up crimes, and we have a lot of examples like that. But certainly Hitler was not known as a promoter of Judeo-Christianity or even Christianity. I think he was more in the Nietzschean sense of get behind me, pale Galilean. His weak Jesus is for the birds. We have a lot of people who associate Jesus with guns and with violence, onward Christian soldiers. I mean, that can be used. I mean, Roosevelt, I think, was inspired by that when Churchill was trying to inspire him to back England fighting alone or being bombed alone in World War II. So there is a tradition of holy war in the Bible, of course, and there is a tradition of crusades in the church, and I think we've gone past that for the most part. I mean, we still have many, many groups that are very, very angry and like violence. They want violence, the wrath of God, etc. I don't think that's a proper use of reason. I don't think that's a proper understanding of Jesus, who said, put the sword back in your sheath, even though he has parables where they slaughter everyone who didn't believe in the new king or the king that was appointed, etc. All these things have to be thought about. And I have been thinking about Jesus. This may be a different program. I started my stopwatch late. I don't want to go too long. But Jesus was a man of faith. And I read, as I said, N.T. Wright on Paul, 2 big volumes. And he talks a lot about, he insists on keeping the Greek meaning of the faith of Jesus, not faith in Jesus or but the faith of Jesus. And I was thinking about, for example, exorcisms, demons, devils. I'm reading about Angela da Foligno. So far, I mean, I like her. I like this Franciscan tertiary type woman from the middle of the 13th century. I think she's, I kind of think she's kind of nuts. Doesn't mean that's a reason for me to like her. But she keeps talking about demons here, demons there, demons everywhere. And all these fathers of the church, demons, are always fighting the demons. Jesus exorcised demons. Many illnesses, you're deaf, a mute demon, a deaf demon, some epileptic type of demon or something. So Jesus was a man of his time. He believed, many of the things that were universally believed in the pre-scientific age. He also believed in God, and he believed that God was his own very special father. And he had a unique experience of the fatherhood of God as his own father in a special way. And this is something that we can't, eliminate. He has ideas about how many are saved and the narrow road and Gehenna and all these other things. And it is quite a task to determine exactly what Jesus was about. And I believe he was beloved by many, and especially his disciples, even though they uh, fell back when he was arrested. But he was beloved because he was loving. He loved beautiful meals, getting together, including with, especially almost with outcasts, the ostracized. He healed. You can heal with love. You can heal with confidence. You can heal with almost like a special power that comes out of you. That's what the bleeding woman says in Mark 5, or in other places. There was a power that came out of him. But in some places, he couldn't do any miracles because of their lack of faith, says Mark. So that you need to have, it's not an automatic magic wand from God, as sometimes maybe I would prefer, but rather you need to do something yourself. So that in Mark 6, it says, and he could do no miracle there, with the exception, it's always an exception, right? Of a few who were sick, whom he healed, putting his hands upon them, and he marveled at their lack of faith. So that we have this constant theme in the Bible, even from the book of Deuteronomy. Even though Yahweh had carried Israel like a father carries his son, even then they did not trust. Ma'aminim. They were not trustful of Yahweh, who preceded them on the way, looking for a place for them to encamp. This menucha, this resting place that Numbers talks about, that we all want rest. We follow God, we follow Jesus if we're Christians, the pioneer, the trailblazer. And that's what our prayer is, to trust, even though it's an intelligent trust. It's a trust or a faith that has to be symbiotically related to reason. If your reasonableness casts out your trust as a crutch that you reject as a humiliation or as beneath you, and I've seen people do that, and even get upset when one mentions the word obedience. that is like a very un-English or un-beefeater type of uh, arrogance in a way. The faith should be one that doesn't quench the smoking wick or uh, the smoldering wick, but it nevertheless is a faith in an other outside of ourselves, not faith in myself. Uh, and so I do believe that our being wired for faith is something we can't eliminate. Step one. Number two, what do you do with part of your hardwire or an essential component of your hardware, except perhaps use it and work with it? If you say there's an essential component of my hardware which is not good, well, good luck getting rid of it. One, without the whole computer breaking down. But if you work with it in the right way, and I think the paths could be multiple, religious wise, spirituality wise, etc. You know, I'm evolving, I suppose. I don't know if it's for the worse or for the better in my faith and practice. I mean, certainly the whole COVID thing has changed a lot of habits. One of my habits is probably going to bed earlier and earlier, maybe, or at least early enough so that certain events are not, but that's an excuse. I mean, that's not really the only reason my church attendance is lacking. But nevertheless, to be in tune with this essential component of your hardware, which is your need to trust, and to be able to vest. I forget. I don't know how you would clothe your uh, hardware component of trust with the right apparatus or vestments that are not anti-reason, or at least not contrary to it. Obviously, faith and reason can sometimes be in tension, cognitive dissonance, etc. That just means your faith needs to be purified if you want to keep the faith. And that is what this reading that I started talking about says. It's like the dark night of the soul. So it's like a cleaning. You start getting rid of spots and stains and maybe things that, I don't know, smell, or just like we, bathe and all that. You polish that silver so that it can shine more. If it's a mirror, you can see yourself better in it. And so um, that is the response of faith to the events of life and of the world. I have never been more conscious of how much evil there is in the world, not because only some people are evil. I think we all sin and we all are selfish to one extent or another. But with great power should come great responsibility. And I think that's what happens to some of these movie stars and some of these businessmen like Warren Buffett or Bill Gates or others. This Andres, this cook, this guy's going all around the world cooking. He's cooked millions of meals for the Ukrainian. Jose Andres. It's a response of gratitude to great gifts you were given, but others, they want more, more, more for themselves. This would be the Putins and the Trumps. And people like that are the ones that are responsible, just like that tiny percent that gets richer and richer. These are really the ones that bear the burden, the responsibility for the evils of the world, even for the education of desperate people that may be very uncouth and prone to violence and crime, which I don't agree with, but you try to help others. Eleanor Roosevelt, in this great series, The Roosevelts, has a line that if I can remember it, I'll finish on that note. About Hitler's actions. She put it in her own way. Uh, the burden he has, the responsibility he has assumed, just because he wanted to, of starting World War II. I don't know how he sleeps at night, but again, the powerful have a special responsibility, and they are abusing it quite a bit. And it's across the board, but more concentrated on those who love money more, and perhaps those who, I have to say it, whose base is more angry, more left behind, less educated, less prone to critical thinking, and they have to cater to that, to those people. That's how they get their power. So they have to attack the truth much more, because that's how they get more power. That's what Putin is doing, Russian style, total control. Here we do it more subtly, not too subtle. Just listen to the people yelling on TV or the radio. But nevertheless, they will receive a harsher judgment, says the Epistle of James. Do not many of you seek to become teachers, uh, because you will receive a harsher condemnation or sentence. He refers to it as himself. James, I'll just try to end on this little note. This is one of the first courses I took in Rome, and it was beautiful. And it says basically, let not many of you, my brethren, become teachers, knowing that a greater krima, a greater judgment or condemnation we will receive. We will receive. So I, wanted to do this video this morning. I felt it was time to contribute something, humble as it might be, and to say a few words about this idea of trust, and how when we are more and more stripped of all these crutches, all these signs of, God's love and things like that, that's when our faith becomes more purified and is less dependent on, you know, maybe Padre Pio with the stigmata or some miracles or something. They help. I told you about finding that quote, I thought, miraculously that night. The mind is incredible as far as intuitions and things like that. But this went beyond, because I had no clue where this line would be in these little books that I looked in. I looked at number 2 and I chose the right one. Trust. we'll have to continue with this. There's no, finality to the idea of trust. In trusting and being quiet shall be your security. Let's see if I can end on that note from Isaiah. This is from the Primitive Carmelite Rule. This translation says, by conversion and calm you shall be liberated. In Hebrew, there's a sheket, quietness, and bitcha, trust. But it's all, part of a great tradition of stay calm, cool, collected, because you have this fundamental trust.